Hello and welcome to Real Basic TV Episode 1. I'm your host, George Bonish. For those of you who've never tuned in before, Real Basic TV is a video podcast covering some of the latest tips and tricks for the Real Basic development environment. On today's episode, I'm going to be introducing the Real Basic IDE, and we're going to be getting familiar with using the GUI and most of the built-in objects. We're going to go ahead and build a real simple application using the most basic objects included in Real Basic, like windows, push buttons, checkboxes, edit fields, and then we're going to get comfortable with building our project into an actual application that can be run. So if you have Real Basic installed, go ahead and open it up and let's get started. Currently I'm using Real Basic 2007, but most recent versions of Real Basic should look pretty much similar to this. So everything I do should be pretty universal. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do, you'll notice the toolbar up here. It's pretty similar to a browser's toolbar. I'm going to go ahead and make these buttons a bit smaller so that so we can have a little bit more space to work with. And you can do the same thing as well if you wish. To go ahead and do that, you can click or right click anywhere in this white space back here, and you can choose any one of these. For my preference, I'm going to go ahead and choose small icons, and you'll notice the icons got smaller and we lost the text underneath it and underneath the this address bar and the search bar here, and we have considerable amount of real estate to work with now. So this should be the first window that you see. You'll notice again the browser-like toolbar up top with the back and forward buttons and the rest of these. You'll notice a tab here, and this is going to be where our tab bar is. Real Basic uses a tabbed interface to switch between all the windows, so that makes it real handy. This is our project pane. It's going to contain all our objects that are contained within our project, any windows, menu bars, classes, or methods that we create. You're going to be able to locate them here. It's basically like a bird's eye view of our current project or the application that we're building. And then this pane over here, it's the property value pane. Anything that's clicked over here in our project pane, it's going to be referenced over here, the properties and values associated with it. You're not going to need to worry about any of this right now. We're just going to get familiar with it, but you'll notice if I click here, window 1, all these properties will be displayed here along with their values. And you'll notice we have position properties and appearance properties and the name of our object. But again, we're not going to worry about that for this episode. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. To tell you a little bit about a default project, each default project has these basic objects here: app, window 1, and menu bar 1. For this episode, let's just worry about window 1. So window 1 is the default window of the application. Whenever the user runs the program, window 1 is what's going to be the first window that pops up. So anything we're going to want to do in today's episode, we're going to be in window 1. Now we can always add more windows if we want, but by default, Real Basic assigns window 1 as the default window for the application. So let's go ahead and open up window 1 by double clicking on it, and you'll notice that a new tab opened up top here, and we can switch back to our project window and our window 1 window here using these tabs. We can also rearrange the tabs by clicking and dragging. You'll notice window 1's on the left now. I can drag it back, and you can close tabs by clicking this little close button here. Okay, so to cover a little bit about the window 1 editing window here, you'll notice a controls pane here on the left side. This is a list of all the built-in controls that Real Basic offers. You'll notice things like edit fields, combo boxes, checkboxes. A lot of these things should look familiar to you if you've ever used a web browser before. You know, you have progress bars, buttons, pretty much the basic stuff. Here is our main design pane, where most of our designing is going to be of the GUI of our program. You know, if we're going to add buttons or we're going to add input fields, this is where we're going to do it. You can resize everything here, you know, add text to your window, whatever you're going to need to do. And then on the right side, again, we have another property value pane. And like the other one, this references any objects that are selected within our design pane here. And you'll notice that this background window here, which is window 1, is currently selected. And you can notice that by these disclosure boxes around the perimeter. Now these disclosure boxes also serve the purpose of resizing handles. So you'll notice you can click and resize this window, but let's go ahead and keep it at the default for now, right about I'd say here. And you'll notice again that the properties and values are reflected for the window here. Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and start designing our application. Our first program is going to be very, very simple. We're just going to be creating an input field and a couple of buttons, and we're going to ask the user to input a word. We're going to make sure the user input an actual word, and then we're going to create a pop-up box, or as Real Basic calls it, a message box, repeating the information back to the user. Then we're going to do a couple other stuff here, but let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing we're going to want to do is rename our window. You can see right now it's labeled Untitled. And this is what's going to be on the top of the toolbar, basically like it is here in the window whenever the user runs the application. There's two ways to do this really, but the easiest way would be to just reference it here in the property value pane. So you can go ahead and make sure your window is selected by clicking anywhere on the background or on the top here. And you'll notice here in the property value pane a property labeled title, and you'll see Untitled here as it is right here. So if you go ahead and select, click once in here, we can rename it to whatever we want. And in my case, I'm going to name it realbasic.tv, and you can hit the return key or the enter key to submit those changes, and you'll notice that it changed right up top as well. Alrighty, the next thing we're going to do is add some text onto the screen to tell our user to enter in some text for us to read back to them. So we're going to come over here into our controls pane and locate the static text control. You'll notice it right here. You'll see the two double A's right next to it. We can go ahead and now there's two ways to add controls to our window. We can either double click on it or click and drag. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click and drag it, and you'll notice there's a little box where the text will appear, and you can just drag it anywhere under the window and drop it. And again, you'll notice this one says Untitled, and that's fine for now. Let's go ahead and position this where we're going to want it on the window. You'll notice that it has these disclosure boxes around it, and it's the currently selected object. You can notice that by looking here in the property value pane and seeing the name static text 1. You don't need to worry about the super or the index or anything right now. Let's go ahead and move our static text over to the top left hand side of the window. You'll see these little green bars that'll appear. Now what these are is what Apple recommends you place that object on the window, basically like their standard design parameters. You don't have to follow those. I personally like them because they're easier to manage your objects around your window. But we're going to go ahead and place it here at the 20 and 14 mark, and you'll notice that the object kind of snaps to those lines. So you can go ahead and drag it there and release it. Okay, let's go ahead and change the text here from Untitled to something more appropriate. In order to do that, again, there's two ways. For this episode, we're going to do the easier way. Go ahead and click on your object, make sure your object is clicked, and come over to the property value pane. And again, you'll notice here, unlike window 1, this one is called text as opposed to title. So we can go ahead and either clicking here once, you have the ability to change it, or by clicking on this little circle with ellipses here, it'll bring up a window where we can actually add a long value. We can do it like this. Let's go ahead and have the user enter text, and then we'll hit OK, and you'll notice it changes there as well. Alright, good. So the next thing we're going to want to do is add an input field. Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and resize this static text box here. You'll notice we have quite a bit of space here that we're not really going to use. So what we can do is grab this disclosure box and drag it in just a bit. Okay, that looks about good. So let's go ahead and grab that that edit field from our control pane here on the left. And what an edit field is, it's basically another name for an input box. You'll notice it looks like this. We can go ahead again and either double click or drag and drop it. In this case I'm going to go ahead and double click so you can see what that'll do. And you'll see it added right here. And again, you'll see these boxes and the properties and values are referenced here on the right side. Let's go ahead and drag and drop this right to the right of the static text right here. And again, we're going to have a little snapping going on. Real Basic is trying to help us position this object to what it thinks is the best. And again, you don't have to follow those, but usually they're pretty helpful. Let's go ahead and position this a little bit to the left here. And when you have an object selected, you can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard to move the object around. And let's go ahead and stretch the width of this out to the window there, right to the edge, 20. Now you notice we have a 20 spacing on the right side here, and then if we select our static text, we have a 20 spacing on the left there. So you'll see they're evenly spaced. And if you have a set width that you specifically are wanting to enter, you can click on the edit field there and come over here to the property value pane and select a width here. So if I wanted it specifically to be 180, I could click in there, change it to 180 and hit return, and it would resize my edit field. But I'm going to go ahead and keep it at 20 there. Okay. So now we have some static text here letting the user know what we want them to do and a place for them to enter that text. Now for ease of use, we're going to go ahead and rename this control, this edit field control here, to something a bit more useful than edit field 1. So we can click on the name field here and let's type something like FLD. Now FLD would be short for field, and generally whenever you have edit fields and you have lots of edit fields within your project, you start each one with FLD or field or whatever you can remember. I personally like FLD, so we can do field text and then hit return to set that change. And the real purpose for an object's name is to reference it within the program. So if we need to read data out of here later on, we would reference it using the field text name, and it's a lot easier to keep track of everything that way when you know exactly what it's going to do by its name. Alright, the next step we're going to do is go ahead and add a couple of buttons, maybe an OK button and a reset button that'll clear this field out. So let's go ahead and find the push button control here. And you'll notice it looks like this. And we can go ahead and double click to add that. And I'll move that right here. And you'll see that it snaps to the right side of that edit field to make sure they line up on the right. And let's add one more. And let's go ahead and drag that up here, and you'll notice that it lines up those two push buttons together, and we can go ahead and have an even spacing right there. Alright, so let's go ahead. You'll notice we have untitled and entitled, and we want to change those obviously to something that the user would be more familiar with. So let's go ahead and click on the first one, and like the window property and like the edit field property and like the I'm sorry, not the edit field, the static text property, a push button has a property that'll change what's displayed here, and in this case it's called the caption property. So let's go ahead and come over here and click on this, and we can change this to let's see, OK, and hit return, and you'll notice it changes the title or the caption of this push button. And this is the one we want it to be the reset button. So let's go ahead and click once there and rename this to reset and hit return. So in this case, the program we've built so far does nothing. We've just pretty much built the GUI of the application. So if we were to run this, it wouldn't do anything. It would just have a couple of buttons that when you pressed them, they wouldn't do anything. And we're going to go ahead and do that in just a couple of seconds here. Let's go ahead and resize the window and bring it up closer to these buttons, so it looks a bit more like like it was designed properly. So I can go ahead and select window 1 here in the background and grab this little disclosure box and drag it up, and you'll notice that Real Basic will snap it once we get close. There you go, to 20, and it's going to be again similar to the top and the sides. Alright, once we've built our application and you're ready to test it, the design wise, we can go ahead and come up here to this little play button. Now there's a difference between running the project and building the project. Whenever you run the project, you're not actually building your final application. You're just kind of building a test application to debug within Real Basic. This icon here is our build icon, and that's going to be whenever we're completely done and ready to upload the program or send it to whoever we're building it for. So let's go ahead and click this this run button here. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and save this project so that we can have a copy of it in case anything were to Real Basic were to crash or whatever whenever we went ahead and debugged this. Let's go ahead and go to File and Save. Now I'm going to save this as RealBasic.tv episode 1. Okay, now that it's saved, you'll notice we have our file name up top here, and we can go ahead and test it out. So just go ahead and click this the debug button here, and it'll compile it and launch our application. Alright, you'll notice that our program popped up here, just like it looked like in the design pane there. You'll see we can type here hello world, but you can see that the buttons right now they don't really do anything. Also, another thing to take note of, you can move the window here around the screen, but you'll notice that the maximize button here is disabled, and there's no resizing widget in the bottom right hand corner, and it's going to be the same if you're using Windows as well. It's not going to have a maximize button, and you're not going to be able to resize the window. So that's one thing that we need to remember to go ahead and activate, if that's what we're going to need for the program. So okay, we know this compiles and runs great and everything, and you can see our static text showed up, our buttons click, and our edit field selects. So that's good. We can go ahead and quit our debugging application here. If you want to click up here and go to quit my application, and it'll bring us right back to our design pane and our control pane here. So let's go ahead and change the resizing of this. The way Real Basic makes it very, very easy. The way we're going to go ahead and do that, make sure your window 1 is selected. And again, you can that by these disclosure boxes in the background, or you can look in your property value pane here on the right and see whatever name is name is in the value. So once your window is selected, go ahead and come over to the right side here in the appearance menu, and you'll notice we have the resizable property and the live resize property and the maximize button property. Now these all have to do with the resizing of this window that's currently selected. Now we're going to want it to be resizable. The resizable property is simply if the window has the ability to be resized or not. So we're going to want to activate that. And the maximize button value enables this maximize button right here. Now you'll notice whenever I check this maximize button property, that this button up here will activate and become enabled. Now you see it got enabled. Now the live resize property allows us, oh, you also notice whenever we added the resizable property that a resizing widget appeared here in the bottom right hand corner. You can watch it again. Okay, now the live resize property, what it is there's two ways that the operating system can resize a window, and you've probably noticed it before, and you may not have, but whenever you're resizing a window, you know, if live resize is enabled and you drag this corner right here out, all the buttons and the edit field, if you have them set correctly, will stretch along with the window, actually while you're dragging and resizing it. Now if live resize is disabled, you're just going to see an outline of the window while you're dragging it until you release it, and then once you release, then all the buttons and the objects on the window will go ahead and resize with it. Now there comes problems with live resize on Windows and on other operating systems, but for now we'll go ahead and enable it for the time being, just to show you what it does. So now we have these activated. Let's go ahead and save it again. You can hit Control S or Command S, and let's debug it. Notice it's compiling and it's launched. And again, we have our debugging application here, and you'll notice this time that the maximize button is enabled and our resizing handle is displayed on the bottom right hand corner. Now let me show you what happens whenever we drag this. Now you notice it snapped open on the bottom there, and we can't drag it up anymore. And also something to note is that our objects here, our controls in the window, don't follow the window. They don't resize with the window. So we're definitely going to want to change that. And also, whenever we're resizing the window, you can see that we can resize it over the controls, and that's definitely something we don't want to do. So let's go ahead and fix all these and test it out again. Now I can show you this maximize button here. What it does, it just makes it full screen or whatever. You can click it again and it'll resize it. But you notice again that the controls don't resize with the window, and that's a problem. We definitely need to fix that. So go ahead and quit your debugging application. Now each control in a window contains a property over here. I can show you, for example, the edit field property. The edit field control. You can see these lock left, lock top, lock right, and lock bottom controls right here. What these do is it locks the control, whichever side the property is, locks that control to that side of the window. So if lock left were enabled and lock right were enabled, then it would lock the leftmost side of the edit field to the left side of the window, and would lock the right side of the edit field to the right side of the window. And so that's what we're going to want to enable. So we'll go ahead and check left and check right, and I'll show you what that did. And you'll notice we'll drag this here, and you can see that it resizes now along with the window. And if we maximize it, it stretches across the entire window. So that's good. So we have the edit field resizing pretty well. Okay, so now that our edit field works, we can go ahead and set our buttons to resize along with the window as well, or to lock to the right side of the window, which is what we're going to want it to do. So whenever you resize this window here, the buttons are going to go ahead and drag along the right with it. So again, like the edit field, these buttons contain the lock left and the lock right properties. So you can go ahead and select each button here, and instead of locking left and locking right, we're going to simply lock right. I can show you now what locking left and locking right would do with the button. It's going to actually stretch the button out, which is something we're not going to want it to do. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing with the left and the right on the OK button as well. Let's go ahead and debug it. Now again, like I said, it's gonna look a little bit weird because we locked them to the left and to the right of the window, so they're gonna stretch out just like that, which is not what we want it to do. we want them simply to stay aligned with the right side and just follow the right side of the window as we resize it. So go ahead and quit your application here and deselect the lock left on each one of these, and let's save it and debug it again. And now you'll notice that the window, or that the buttons stay locked to the right side of the window, as does the edit field. So you can see, you can get you know, a feel for how locking to to a side of the window will make each control react. You know, play around with it, kind of get a feel for it. Still, you know, our buttons in our edit field don't do much right now, but again, we're still going to fix that. So go ahead and quit your debugging application here. So now what we're going to want to do is set a minimum resizing width for our program, for our window 1, so that it can't be, you know, it can't be resized over these buttons and over this text and over this edit field. So go ahead and make sure that window 1 is selected in the background there. And you'll notice over here our minimum width and minimum height properties. So let's go ahead, and since our width right now is 304, which looks like a pretty good, you know, pretty good width, let's go ahead and set our minimum width to 304 as well. And what this is doing is it's telling, you know, telling the application, telling this window that the user cannot resize it any smaller than this right here. So whenever we run the program, you'll see I can drag it to the right up to maximum width here of 32,000 and a minimum of 304, which is what we have now. So let's go ahead and test that out. So you see we can drag it open, but it stops me right there, right at our 304 pixels. And all the numbers, all the sizes that you see in the properties pane are all going to be in pixels measurement. So let's go ahead and quit the application now. So at this point we've simply built our interface. We have the basic, you know, design of our program, of our application, what we're gonna want it to look like. So let's add some code here to make it do a little something. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna have the user enter some text in here, and when they hit the OK button, we're gonna want to have a pop-up window, or real basic what it calls a message box, pop up displaying whatever they entered here in this edit field. So in order to enter the code view of an object or a control, you can do that in two ways. You can either click on the control, and if you come up here to the top left hand side of your window, you'll notice these two buttons here. You can either click this rightmost button to switch to code view, and you can click the leftmost button to switch back, or you can double click on the control to head right into the controls code view here. Let's go ahead and switch back to the design view and rename these two buttons to something that we can, you know, remember a bit more easily than push button 1 and push button 2. So go ahead and make sure you select the OK button here and come over to name, and let's go ahead and name it BTN, which is could be short for button, OK, and hit return. And let's select the reset button, and let's do BTN reset and hit return. Okay, so now if we switch back over to the window 1's code view, you'll notice that we have BTN OK here and BTN reset here. So this makes it a lot easier to manage what we're working with. Now to explain a little bit about the code view with each control, you'll notice first of all it's real simple to use. You know, there's these little disclosure triangles, so you can hide each control's functions there. So to explain a little bit about how the code view works, each control has a series of functions or events, you know, that are called whenever you know, the control is interacted with by the user or by the program itself. Now you see here the button controls have these different methods, these different events. You know, there's the action event, there's a close event, you know, mouse down, mouse enter. Now you're not going to need to worry about most of these right now. For this episode, we're just going to worry about the action event. And what the action event is whatever happens whenever the user clicks on the button. So in our case, what we're going to want to do is read the data that's in this edit field right here, so the text that the user enters, and we're going to want to display it in a message box. So in order to do that, we're going to need to reference our edit field here, which is named field text. We're going to need to reference the text property of it, which contains whatever the user has entered, and then we're going to need to create a message box around that. So the way we're going to do that is to use call the message box function by message box, and you'll notice that RealBasic will attempt to automatically complete a function that it knows. So you can see that it tries to complete message box there, and you can hit the tab key and it'll automatically complete that for you. So the parameters as well, you can look down here at the bottom of the screen, and you can see where it says RealBasic. It kind of disappeared there, but you can see it right at the bottom of the screen there. You can see the parameters of each function. So in this case, message box is looking for a message as a string. So basically we need to pass it a string or a line of text. And in our case, the text property of field text happens to be a string. So let's do message box space. Now we need to reference our edit field object, and again you can see it's trying to complete it there. So go ahead and hit tab, and then hit the dot operator, which will access all the available properties of field text. And if you're not sure what you want to access, you can hit the tab key to bring up a list of all the properties that are available for this control, but we're not going to worry about that for now. So we're just going to have field text dot text. And so now what this is doing is this is passing the text property, or whatever the user has entered, into this edit field to the message box function. And whenever we pass it to that, the message box function is run and a message box will pop up. And this is all contained within the action function of the button, the OK button. So whenever the user presses the OK button, this line of code right here will be run. So let's go ahead and save this and debug the program. You notice it's launching. Okay. Now let's type in hello world and go ahead and hit the OK button. And there you go. You see a message box with hello world. Exactly what we typed in here. And you could change this to RealBasic TV. Hit OK, and you notice RealBasic TV shows up there. Perfect. So let's go ahead and quit that. So now that we have our OK button working fairly well, let's go ahead and work on our reset button. Now what we're going to want the reset button to do is reset this text into here back to blank, back to it is like in the initial state. And in order to do that, it's a very simple process. We can go ahead and switch the code view of the reset button. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. And again, we're in the action function here of the reset button. So now what we're going to want to do is edit fields contain, the text property, and you can set what property you can set a property within the code view by using the equals operator. So what we're going to do is reference the field text dot text property, and that is the text that is contained within our edit field on window 1. And then we use space equals, and then we're going to do open quotes and close quotes. And basically what this is doing, whatever's contained within quotations is what's going to be set as the text property. So I could put hello world here, and since it's contained within the quotes, whenever the user were to hit reset, the edit field would change to hello world. But in our case, we just want to reset it. So let's go ahead and set it as blank, and hit save and run the program. And you'll see hello world. Hit OK, and we still get the message box, and reset resets our edit field. See, it clears it perfectly, and you can hit it as many times as you want, and nothing bad will happen. So let's go ahead and quit this again, and let's switch back to our design pane here. So we're looking pretty good right now. But what if the user doesn't enter any text in here and hits the OK button? They're just going to get a message box with a a blank screen, and we don't want that. So we want to make sure the user enters in some text. So what we're going to do is go ahead and switch back to the OK button code view here. And I'm going to kind of take you through a brief explanation of if statements here. Basically, an if statement is like a condition. If the condition is met or it's not met, then a certain action is taken. And then there's an else operator that you can use with the if statement. So you can have, if a condition is true, then you run an action. Else, and basically else means otherwise, you do another action, and then you have to close your if statement with an end if. So it's basically like you're writing two conditions here. So what we're going to want to do is go to the beginning of this message box here and bring it down a couple lines, and let's make a new if statement. So let's type if field text.text. We want to reference the text that's contained within our edit field, and then equals, and then we're going to want to do open quotes and close quotes just like we did on the reset button. So if it's blank, then use then, and so here's where we're going to want to tell the user, hey, you didn't input something, go ahead and put something in there. So let's make a message box here. So we'll do message box, and then here comes the quotes again. You can open quotes, say please enter some text, and then don't forget to close the quotes. Now let's do an else. So the else condition would be if there is actually something contained within our edit field. So in that case, the user has entered something, and that action we want the message box with what they entered to be displayed. So this is correct for the else block. And now let's go ahead and close out our if statement with an end if, and let's save, and let's go ahead and test it out. So here we got hello world. Okay, and we can reset it, and then so now there's nothing contained within this edit field, so the program should know that and should respond with that error message. Yep, and there it is. See, please enter some text, and you can keep resetting it and keep hitting OK, but it's going to keep telling you that until you enter in some text, and there it goes. Okay, so let's go ahead and quit this application here and switch back to our design pane. So earlier we we edited our controls so that they would resize with the window, but we only edited them to resize horizontally, not vertically. Now what if the user wanted to enter in a lot of data? Well, we don't want it to simply scroll across. We would want a multi-lined edit field, simple, much like Notepad or whatever. We want to allow them to have the ability to have hit the enter key or whatever. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and make this edit field a bit bigger and resize our window. So in order to do that, you just make sure window 1 is selected and use this disclosure box here and drag it, I would say, right about to 250. You'll notice on the right side of the screen you can see the height moving. Okay, 251. I can go ahead and click here and set this to 250 and hit return, and it'll set that property. Now we can go ahead and select these two buttons. If you want to select more than one button, you can hold down either the control key on a PC on Windows or the command key on the Mac and select both buttons at once, and drag this down here, and you'll notice again we have our resizing helper there, and release that, and go ahead and click the edit field property or edit field control, and let's resize this as well right about here, and it'll snap to a good size there. Okay, now right now the edit field is still only one line. If we were to type in it, you just see it scrolling across. Edit field contain a property called the Multiline property, and what that'll do is add a vertical scroll bar here on the right side of it that'll allow the user to scroll up and down depending on how much text they have. So go ahead and select the edit field property, and you'll see the Multiline. I'm sorry, select the edit field control, and you'll notice the Multiline property here. Let's go ahead and select that, and you'll see that the vertical scroll bar was enabled there. So we still have our the edit field is locked left and locked right, and our buttons are locked right. But now that the user is going to be resizing up and down, we're going to want to lock our edit field to the bottom as well. Otherwise, it's not going to stretch to the bottom. And I'll go ahead and show you what that's going to look like right now. So go ahead and save it and run, and you'll see we have we can still type in here, but they only lock left, both the buttons and the lock right, both the edit field and the buttons. So go ahead and quit this and select our edit field and come over here, and let's enable the lock button property, or lock bottom property, and select these two buttons. And again, we can use the multiple selector key that I explained about earlier, and you'll notice if they share a common property, it'll be displayed here, and we can just do lock bottom there. Okay, let's go ahead and save that and run, and you'll notice that the buttons stick to the bottom, and so does the edit field, but it's getting dragged along with the window there. So what we're going to want to do in this case is lock it to the top as well, so that it stretches in all directions. Let's go ahead and quit this application, select the edit field, and lock top. Now our edit field should stay locked with the whole window, and now it can be resized, and you see that our minimum resizing variables are taking into effect here and not allowing the user to resize it too small. But whenever we maximize the window, you'll see that our edit field is maintained the appropriate size, and our buttons are staying on the bottom right where we want them. And let me show you what the multiline text looks like. So if we have hello world, and I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this over and over. And you'll see on the right side our scroll bar is getting smaller, and we can scroll up and down. And our buttons will still work with the edit field, since we didn't change anything besides the size and the properties of it. And you'll see this is all the text contained in our field text object here. And again, we can reset it, and it clears the edit field totally. So let's go ahead and quit this application. So now that we have our edit field and our buttons working the way we want them to work, and our window resizing correctly, let's go ahead and add one other control here to the window. What we're going to want to add is a checkbox. And what our checkbox is going to do, we're going to title it the enabled checkbox. And whenever there's a check in it, we're going to have all these objects enabled. And what enabled means is that the user can interact with them. The user can type in the edit field. The user can press these buttons, and each control contains an enabled property. You'll notice if I click the OK button here, you'll see the enabled property right there. If I click the edit field, you'll see the enabled property right here. And whenever something is enabled or disabled, you'll notice that the color will change of it. It'll be grayed out there, and the user can't select that. So instead of setting the property here in the properties pane, we're going to make it dynamic and set it using the code, and actually change the code dynamically using the checkbox. So go over here to your control pane and locate the checkbox control, and let's go ahead and double click that to add it, and you'll notice it added right here. And let's drag it right there and resize this just a bit. Okay, so again, the title of it is untitled, just like most of the things are whenever they're added to a window. So make sure the checkbox is selected, and let's go ahead and come over here to the caption property. And the caption property is just like the title properties of a window, or the text properties or whatever. So go ahead and rename the caption to enabled and hit return to set that. And you can also see that the checkbox is not checked by default, and we're going to want our objects, our controls, to be enabled by default. So let's go ahead and select the checkbox and come over here to the value property, and you'll see it's under initial state. So the initial state of the checkbox, we're going to want it to have a value. So when I select this, you can go ahead and watch this checkbox right here, and you'll see that a check is going to appear. You see, whenever I enable this value, there's a value in here. So this is what the user is going to see whenever they first run the program. The checkbox does nothing right now. I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Since we have no code in it, it's simply a blank checkbox. It's just a design right now. So go ahead and quit this application. And like we did with the with these push buttons here, we're going to go ahead and double click on this checkbox to go into the action pane, or I'm sorry, the action method of the checkbox. So the way the action method works is whenever a user clicks the check button, it toggles on and off. It adds or removes the check, and depending on either way, if there's a check or there isn't a check, the action code gets executed. So what we're going to do is check the actual button to see if there is a check mark there, and depending on if there is or there is not, we're going to want to enable or disable the controls on the window. So let's go ahead and write an if block here, an if statement that's going to check the status of our button. So first I'm going to do if check enabled, and what check enabled is again is the name of our control, of our check button control, dot value equals false. Then, so what this if statement is saying is that if after the user clicked the button it became false, so in other words, if the user clicked the button and the check mark was removed, then we're going to want to execute some code. And in this case, we're going to want to disable those three controls: the button, reset button, OK, and the field text controls. We're going to want to disable them. So in this case, again, like I was showing you before, they each contain an enabled property. And we're going to go, and that's a Boolean property. And what a Boolean property is, it means it contains an either true or a false. So we're going to want to go ahead and set those to false. So enabled equals false, and field text dot enabled equals false. So now we're going to put our else block in here. So the else block will be called if the opposite of this is true. So if after the user clicked the button, the check mark was to appear, we're going to want to re-enable all the controls. So we're going to want to do the exact opposite of what's in here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here and set these all to true. And don't forget to close your if statement here and save, and let's go ahead and test this. Now you notice that our button is enabled by default, as well as our controls, and everything still works here. I can show you that. Okay, and you still get the hello world message box, and we can reset it, and you still get to please enter some text. But now whenever we hit this checkbox here, we're going to be disabling, the value property of this checkbox is going to be set to false. So we're going to want to disable all this, and you'll notice it does that. And I can't click in this edit field anywhere. I can't select any of these buttons, and the checkbox was the check mark was removed from the box. So now if we check it again, you notice that everything has been re-enabled. So you can see like that, like that. So the checkbox seems to work fine. Let's test it just to make sure. And we get hello world. So let's go ahead and quit this application. And we can close our code editor here and switch back to our main design pane. So we've built a pretty simple application here. We have user input, we have checkboxes, we have buttons, we have some static text. We have a little bit of everything that Real Basic, some of the basic things that it offers. And it's a pretty good start. We've covered the resizing of a window, and switching between the code views and design views. So what I'd recommend to you is to play around with this, play around with the locking options of a button here, or of an edit field. Add some more text, add a couple edit fields. Play around with it. That's really the best way to learn, is to play around. Build something that you would actually use. So now finally, I'm going to go ahead and cover the actual building of the application. Creating the exe file or the app file on a Mac. And to do that, we're going to want to go. We're going to want to tell Real Basic first of all what operating system we're going to be compiling it for. So whether Windows or Linux or Mac, we can tell Real Basic that here. So if you go ahead and come up to the top of the window, go to Project, and move your mouse down to Build Settings. You notice it right now, since I'm on a Macintosh system, Mac OS 10 Universal Binary selected. Now if you're on Windows, I'm sure the Windows check here would be enabled, and Linux same here. And we can enable as many of these as we want to compile to, but in our case, we're going to just build a Mac OS Universal Binary here, and we can hit OK. So now our settings are all set and everything, and I would recommend just go ahead and saving one more time. And so now we're ready to compile the final program, the final application. In order to do that, again, go up to the Project menu here, and you'll see this little Build Application menu item. Now we can either do it through here, or if you can remember from just a little while ago, I showed you this build icon here, and this is probably a little bit easier. Either one is fine. It'll do the same thing. So go ahead and click the build icon, and you'll see it's compiling, and here my application was built, and these are all the saves files you can see. And if we double click on this, our program will launch. Again, resizable. Oh, one thing that we didn't do actually here was set the lock property of this checkbox. So good, we can go ahead and change that now. So let's go ahead and quit this application, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the trash here. Let's go back here to our design window and select the check, a check enabled control here. And since we're going to want to lock it to the, let's do the left side of the window and the bottom, so that whenever we resize it this way, it'll drop down with the window. So make sure it's selected and click the lock left and lock bottom properties and save. And let's run it one more time just to test, and you'll notice that it stays right where it should. Okay, so we can go ahead and quit this. Now that we know everything works right, let's go ahead and build the application one more time, and it'll show up right here. And again, everything works just as it should. Put hello world, be displayed, reset it, and everything works just as it should. So we've covered lots of basics here. Make sure you register in the forums. We can talk more about this if you have any questions, if you need any help, or even more ideas for other episodes. Please do go to the website and register, and get your place on there. And definitely stay tuned in the future for more episodes to come. For Real Basic TV, this is George Bonish. It's been great helping you guys out.